I'm pulling my sled every single day, 12 hours per day for 54 days to just barely make it across Antarctica. And I end up completing that crossing and becoming the world's, first person to ever do so. And in doing that, I tapped into these deep places of meditative calm and flow. So much so that at the end of the expedition, I'm practically out of food. My ribs and hip bones are sticking out because I've lost so much weight. My body's in severe, severe decline. If I had walked into a hospital in the state that I was in, they would have immediately put me in the ICU or something. They're like, this guy's gonna die. But my mind was so sharp and so clear by the end of this, so much so that on my very last day in Antarctica, I pulled my sled 77 miles, 33 hours nonstop with a handful of bites of food because I had tapped into these flow states of meditative peace and calm in my mind. And I also got in touch with, source energy. I started really, I put my arms out and I started just saying these words coming to me, infinite love, infinite love. I was so alone in the world, in the physical space, but I actually felt so connected to humanity, so connected to my family, my friends, my community. It was literally energizing my entire body. So fast forward a couple years later, I had an expedition planned to Everest. I was going to go back to Nepal. I had a couple other things on the book. And, here we are, and it's COVID happens. And of course, everything gets canceled. My expeditions being canceled are the least of the world's worries at that point, but it forces me to, basically sit alone in my house. And I'm sitting there and everything's canceled. And, Jenna's kind of looking at me like, you don't seem like you're doing well. I'd sitting there on my couch, you haven't changed out of your, pajamas in several days. And I was like, when was the last time I felt like that peace and calm and flow in my body? And I actually thought, it was during my Antarctica expedition. And so I said to her, hey, I'm going to go for a walk tomorrow. I'm just going to go for a long walk and just kind of clear my head. That movement seems to help me. So I walk out the front door that day and I say to her, I'll be back by dinner time. It's great. So I walk out the front door and my phone buzzes in my pocket 20 minutes in. And I pull my phone out and I'm about to text my friend back who's ever texting me. I'm like, wait, what am I doing? During COVID, right? You're doom scrolling the news and reading the headlines and checking your social media and Zoom calling people was new. You're like, what? I was like, I don't need my phone today. So I put my phone in airplane mode and I start walking. And I end up walking for 12 hours that day. Not trying to go a certain distance. I stop, I take plenty of breaks, I sit down, I reflect, but I'm alone by myself like I had been in Antarctica, but instead I'm on the Oregon coast. And I walk back in the front door of the small cabin we're staying in that my family has in the Oregon coast, and Jenna looks at me and she goes, "You're back." And I look at her and I was like, "Yeah, I told you I'd be back around dinner time." She goes, No. You're back. She could see this shift inside of me over the course of that day. And I flipped her. I said, "You're right. I actually feel better than I felt in a really long time." But I think nothing of it. I'm the guy who walks across Antarctica. I'm this athlete, whatever. And people start calling me. We're catching up with your friends like we all were. How are you doing? How's your family? Catching up with people during COVID. And I started telling people I did this thing. It really kind of reoriented, really reshift where my mind, body, soul was. And what'd you do? I said, I went on this 12-hour walk. And they're like, 12-hour walk? And I was like, yeah, it's not about how far you go or anything. I take as many breaks as you want. Before I knew it, friends and family members started taking me up on it. And my ultra marathon friend, he did 50 miles or something walked super fast, really far, whatever. My mother-in-law, 77 years old, she does the walk. And for her, it's one time around her block, but then decides to sit silently on her porch in North Carolina for an hour and then do another one time around the block, right? Mm-hmm. And I realized neither one of the people were doing the 12-hour walk more right than the other person. It's accessible to everyone, as you mentioned. And so I wrote a book called The 12-Hour Walk and have created this global movement. You can check it all out on 12hourwalk.com. There's an app that helps support this, but it's a simple idea. And the idea is what I'm talking about. It's literally an invitation, completely free, for people to put their phone on airplane mode, walk out their front door, and spend 12 hours alone by themselves. And your question is, what's your Everest? Now, I find that there's two groups of people. Obviously, there's some gray area between all of this, but two distinct groups of people. There's the people, when I ask them the question, what's your Everest? They say, my Everest is this. I just don't know how to get there, or I'm working towards it, but it's a long journey and whatever, right? They're on the path, but they actually know where they're going. But as we mentioned before, there's this whole other subset of people that go, what if I don't know what my Everest is? And in the 12-hour walk, it's an invitation to spend that time alone yourself, but I encourage people to set an intention. So for those that are like, my Everest is X, but I have these limiting beliefs or things that are standing between me and that destination, I said, great. Spend some time alone in your thoughts, allowing your brain to think or not think or flex or, ideate or have creativity around that. But for the group of people that are like, but I don't know what my Everest is, I say, then you've got your answer for the walk. Walk out your front door and say, what is my Everest? What do I care about? What are my values? And it is amazing to me. At this point, I've had, 100,000 people around the world, in 40, 50 different countries have taken on the 12-hour walk at this point. And my personal Everest is to inspire 10 million people one day to take the 12-hour walk. And in doing so, people send me videos at the end of their walk, and it's just one after the next. People, they're crying, they're lit up, they're unlocked, and they go, I didn't think anything was going to happen. And then something happened. Hour 9, it just came to me. Boom. And this is what I'm passionate. I've seen people reorient their life. I've seen people have had this creativity, in their businesses, in their relationships, and repair, deep clarity on all sorts of things just by engaging the silence, not by how far they walked, by just taking a day. You could sit on your front porch for 12 hours. That's fine. That's what's still the 12-hour walk. And you also said this thing about time. So in the book, I break down 10 common limiting beliefs. I won't go through them all now, but one of them is, 12-hour walk. I mean, I'm busy. I've got my wife. I got kids. I got this. I don't have a time for that. And that's a real limiting belief. I feel that sometimes. I know you feel that sometimes. It's just part of it. But such an interesting thing that I have found about these 12 hours is they're so potent, and people come back and they go, I almost didn't schedule this because I just didn't figure out how I could fit this into my busy life. But the crazy thing is, this was the best investment of time that I've ever made. I've been spinning on this problem at work that I've worked thousands of hours on trying to figure out, and I can't solve it. And it came to me during the 12-hour walk because I took a day to be in stillness, right? Or, someone's debating, I hear this all the time, like, oh, I got this job opportunity to, go to the other side of the country, but, I have to uproot my family. I had this, I did this whole pros and cons list, and I couldn't figure it out. There's pros and cons, and should I do this? But just they're tying themselves in knots. Mm-hmm. And I've heard many versions of the same story. And I took 12 hours. I walked at my front door. I sat in stillness, and for the first time in years, I could hear my intuition. I realized that the answer lay within me. I don't know what the answer is for you. I can't tell you what the right decision is. More often than not, we know the answer. It lies within, but it have to actually allow your mind to not be distracted by your social media and your this and that and whatever. Go back to that the next day. And so that I don't have enough time, it's an interesting limiting belief because people say like, wow, it was only 12 hours. It was only a half of one day that had this exponential impact. And I didn't have to pay for this expensive piece of gear or fly to somewhere to this or whatever. It's like all you literally have to do is, if you have kids, you need childcare for the day, or have your partner swap you out or something like that. It's out your front door. You need a pair of shoes and just a willingness to just spend a day by yourself. And it's amazing the insights that I've seen come from people through this process.